I loved my house in a way most people would never understand. It wasn't just walls and a roof. It was my heartbeat outside my body. Every morning, I would wake up and run my fingers along the banister I'd chosen, look out through windows I'd saved years to afford, and feel something like peace. A two-story cottage on a quiet lane with a small garden and an apple tree that I swear grew just for me. Have you ever wanted something so desperately that when you finally get it, you're afraid to breathe too hard around it? I built that house before I met Stephen. Every penny for the down payment, every signature on the mortgage papers, every decision about paint colors and light fixtures, all mine. Not with my hands, of course. I didn't lay the bricks or shingle the roof, but the money, the vision, the sacrifice, that was all me. A young, ambitious woman determined to have one corner of the world that was completely her own. When Stephen moved in after our wedding, he brought nothing. Not financial contribution, not sweat equity, not even a decent set of kitchen towels. Just himself and his smile that I so desperately wanted to believe in. And invisibly, silently, moving in right behind him, his mother, Susan. God, Susan. Have you ever met someone who could make you feel small with just a glance? Her eyes followed me everywhere in my own home, assessing, judging, finding fault. When I was your age, she'd begin, and something in me would shrink back like a child. I knew what was coming, the inevitable comparison I could never win. You work too much, Victoria, she'd say, stirring sugar into tea I'd made in cups I'd bought. You barely care for your husband. A man needs to feel like the head of the house, and you're overshadowing him with your career, or watching me tend my garden. I don't get why you bother with that garden. It's just a waste of time and money. You'd be better off buying a new coat. Every word delivered with that thin smile, that look that said, I know what's best for my son, and it isn't you. I'd look to Stephen, searching his face for defense, for alliance, for anything resembling backbone. He'd just shrug those shoulders that I once found so attractive. That's just how Mum is, he'd say, his voice trailing off. You know her. Just ignore it. Just ignore it. As if her cruelty was a quirk, like collecting stamps or humming off key. As if the constant drip of criticism wasn't eroding the foundation of everything I'd built. I think we all have monsters we're willing to tolerate because we're terrified of being alone. What's yours? Mine wore floral perfume and brought store-bought pies to Sunday dinner while telling me my kitchen was never quite clean enough. I tried talking to Stephen, tried explaining how it felt to be constantly undermined in my own home. What? Are you making up? He'd brush me off. Mum loves you, just in her own way. Loves you in her own way. The words that excuse 1,000 cuts. I felt resentment building inside me, brick by brick, like a wall I never wanted. I started wondering if I'd made a terrible mistake, if Stephen wasn't the man I'd dreamed of spending my life with. But I kept hoping, kept believing things could get better. I didn't want to break up my family, didn't want to admit I'd chosen wrong. You know that feeling? When you know something's broken, but you keep pretending it's whole, because facing the truth would hurt too much. I was recovering from an old surgery when it happened. The pain hit like lightning, sharp and without warning, stealing my breath. I remember fragmentary images, my bedroom's heavy curtains, the frightened faces of doctors, flashing lights through the ambulance window. Then, darkness. The doctors said something about complications. I needed immediate intensive care. Stephen stood silent in the emergency room, watching me being wheeled away. He didn't offer a single word of comfort, just stood there, already somewhere else in his mind. For days, I hovered between life and death, drifting in and out of consciousness. The fight for survival took everything I had. I wasn't thinking about my house, about Stephen, about his domineering mother. I just wanted to live. How could I have known what was happening back at home? How could I have imagined the betrayal unfolding in my absence? While I fought for my life, Susan saw opportunity in my empty house. My absence was her invitation. And Stephen, as always, bent to her will like a sapling in strong wind. It's still hard to say it out loud, even now. While I lay unconscious in a hospital bed, tubes keeping me alive, they threw a lavish 50th birthday party for Susan. In my house, 50 people, for 3 days. 3 days of strangers trampling through my garden, breaking my furniture, staining my walls, touching my things. 3 days of celebration while I struggled to survive just miles away. When I think of it now, my throat still tightens. The violation of it, the absolute disregard, but it gets worse. To fund this extravagant celebration, this party I never consented to, They used my credit card, to which Stephen had access. They spent recklessly, ordering food, drinks, entertainment. They maxed out the limit without a second thought. $3,000. Not a small sum for most people. Certainly not for me. When I learned what they'd done, every memory of kindness I'd ever built between us collapsed like a house of cards. The neighbors saw it all. The trash being hauled out of my house. The loud music and drunken shouts. They knew something was wrong. But who would step in? Susan was formidable. No one wanted to cross her. Only Mrs. Nancy, my elderly neighbor, confronted Stephen. "Stephen, what are you doing?" she asked, eyeing my ruined lawn and broken flowers. "Victoria loved this house so much. How could you let this happen?" He just waved her off, grinning drunkenly. "Relax, Mrs. Nancy. Why are you so worked up? It's Mum's birthday. Victoria will clean it up later. She's good at that. Victoria will clean it up later." As if I existed only to tidy up after their destruction. Do you know the unique pain of realizing someone sees you as nothing more than their personal maid, their ATM, their convenient stepping stone? In the final days of my ICU stay, I began to regain consciousness. I felt weak and exhausted, but my mind was clearing. I thought of my house, my garden, my quiet life. I couldn't wait to return home, see Stephen, and breathe fresh air again. I was so innocent then, wasn't I? So completely unaware of what awaited me. The taxi pulled up to my house after my hospital discharge. I felt frail but determined. The whole ride I'd imagined brewing a strong cup of tea, settling into my favorite armchair by the window, gazing at my garden to restore my strength. Instead, when I stepped out of the taxi, I smelled cigarettes and stale food before I even reached the door. My beautiful garden, trampled and ruined. Flowers broken on the ground, bushes snapped, the lawn littered with cigarette butts and debris, empty liquor bottles and crumpled paper cups across my porch, the front door ajar, like an open wound. Have you ever had that moment when reality shifts, when the world you thought you knew reveals itself to be something else entirely? I pushed, opened the door, and what I saw left me breathless. My home, my sanctuary, my fortress, had been turned into a pigsty. Trash everywhere, cigarette butts ground into my carpets, broken dishes, food scraps, the furniture damaged and stained, wine spills and greasy fingerprints marred the walls I'd painted myself. The air reeked of tobacco, alcohol, and unwashed bodies. In the living room, amid this chaos, sat Susan. She was calmly sipping tea from my grandmother's porcelain cup as if nothing was wrong. A smug smile played on her lips. "Oh, Vicky, you're back," she said casually, as if I'd just stepped out for a couple of hours. "We were just celebrating my birthday." The casual cruelty of it stole my breath. Have you ever been so angry that something crystallizes inside you? Something hard and clear that wasn't there before? I stared at her, speechless. A wave of anger and despair rose within me. "Where's Stephen?" I finally managed, struggling to keep my voice steady. "Stephen? He's out on some errands." Susan waved her hand dismissively. "Don't worry, he'll be back soon. Sit down, have some tea." Tea, in my destroyed home, with the woman who orchestrated its ruin. I shook my head, unable to believe my ears. She was acting as if everything was fine, as if this was her house, and she had every right to do as she pleased. "What happened here?" I asked quietly, trying to control the tremor in my voice. "What do you mean? What happened?" She shrugged. "We celebrated, had fun." "What? We're not allowed? It was my birthday, and you were just lying in the hospital. What's it to you?" I felt my legs buckle. I sank into a chair, trying to process what I'd heard. "Where are my things?" I asked, scanning the room. "Where are my photos? My books?" "Oh, come on, Vicky." Susan dismissed me with a wave. "They weren't that important. We tidied up a bit, threw out some junk. Why do you need all that clutter? My photos, my books, my memories, called junk and thrown away without a second thought. Sometimes suffering makes you see with absolute clarity. In that moment, everything I'd tolerated, excused and swallowed down, rose to the surface. I stood up, fighting to keep from screaming, and said, "Get out of my house, now." Susan raised her eyebrows in surprise. "What are you talking about? This is my house too. I live here, and I'm not going anywhere. This is my house," I repeated, firmly. "I bought it before the marriage. You have no rights here. Leave now, or I'll call the police." She laughed, actually laughed at me. "The police? Who do you think you are with your police? Stephen's my son, and he has a right to live here. If he lives here, so do I." I knew arguing was pointless. I pulled out my phone and dialed the police. Hello, this is Victoria. I'd like to report an illegal trespass and property damage at my home. Susan leapt from her chair, trying to snatch the phone. What are you doing? Have you lost your mind? I'll show you police. I pushed her away and continued speaking. Yes, I need a unit dispatched immediately. There's an unauthorized person in my home who refuses to leave and is threatening me. After hanging up, I set the phone on the table and looked at Susan. There was no fear or doubt left in me, only determination to protect what was mine. I'm waiting for the police, I said calmly, and you'll answer for everything you've done here. Susan glared at me venomously. You'll regret this, Vicky. You'll regret it. While waiting for the police, I decided to see what else had happened in my house. I walked to the bedroom and froze in horror. My belongings were strewn across the room, my closets upended. I felt dizzy. I sank to the floor and cried. It hurt. It was infuriating. It was terrifying. Struggling to my feet, I went to the study. There on the desk, I saw a bank statement. Picking it up, I scanned the numbers and felt my blood run cold. A $3,000 debt. A debt I didn't incur. I buried my face in my hands. How could they do this? How could Stephen let his mother do this to me? I had always trusted him, loved him, supported him, and he betrayed me in the most despicable way. When the police arrived, I opened the door with a deep breath. 2 officers stood on the porch. Hello, I said. I called you. I let them in and pointed to Susan, who stood in the living room, glaring at me. This woman illegally entered my home and refuses to leave. She's also damaged my property and committed fraud with my credit card. The officers tried to get Susan to comply, but she refused and began shouting. You have no right to detain me. I live here and this is my house. Eventually, they had to use force to escort her out. I watched as she was led to the police car, feeling an enormous weight lift from my shoulders. I knew this was just the beginning, that more battles lay ahead. But I was ready to fight for my freedom and my happiness. Never again would I let anyone control or manipulate my life. That night, after the police left, I barely slept. Adrenaline and anger kept me awake, planning my next moves. The following morning, despite my exhaustion, I went straight to a lawyer. The attorney, a middle-aged woman with a sharp gaze, listened to my story without interrupting, occasionally asking clarifying questions. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair and said, It's a messy situation, but entirely winnable. The house was purchased before your marriage. It's solely yours. The unauthorized use of your credit card and the property damage are easily provable. I felt a weight lift from my chest. What do I need to do? I asked. First, we file for divorce, she replied. Second, a lawsuit for damages to your property and the fraudulent use of your credit card. Third, we get a restraining order to keep Susan away from your house. I nodded, ready for anything. With each document I signed, I felt I was cutting ties with my past, with the naive, trusting version of myself who let others manipulate her. Never again. The court summons came quickly. Stephen seemed utterly lost. He called me, begging me to reconsider, claiming his mother had gone too far, but that he'd fix everything. I was unmoved. Did you know what was happening? I asked him over the phone. You saw them destroying my house and did nothing. You chose her over me. Now face the consequences. Susan remained defiant. She refused to admit guilt, insisting I was just an ungrateful daughter-in-law who didn't appreciate her care. She kept claiming everything was for Stephen's happiness. In court, I stayed calm and confident. I presented all the evidence, bank statements, photos of the wrecked house, and neighbor testimonies. Mrs. Nancy's testimony was particularly valuable. She detailed the raucous party, the drunken guests, the broken furniture, and the trampled garden. Stephen looked pathetic in court. He tried to justify himself, saying he didn't know things would go so far, that he tried to stop his mother but couldn't. I looked at him with disdain. He had always been weak and spineless, and I blamed myself for not seeing it sooner. The court found Susan guilty of unauthorized credit card use and disturbing the peace. She was fined and barred from approaching my house. Stephen was found liable for the property damage and ordered to cover all losses, including the cost of repairs and new furniture. The court also granted my divorce petition. After the trial, I felt immense relief. I had won. I had reclaimed my house. But more importantly, I had freed myself from the toxic influence of my husband and mother-in-law. The house remained mine, and all expenses and compensation fell on Stephen. I breathed a sigh of relief. The first victory was mine. Now came the harder part, restoring order to my house and my life. I didn't waste time. I hired workers who quickly repaired the house. I threw out all the old furniture that reminded me of the past and bought new, modern, stylish pieces. I repainted the walls in light tones, filling the house with brightness and air. I planted new flowers in the garden, replacing the trampled beds with neat lawns and vibrant blooms. I bought new dishes, curtains, and rugs. Step by step, I transformed my house back into a cozy, safe haven. But this process wasn't just physical, it was emotional. By letting go of old things, I was letting go of old grudges and disappointments. I was closing the door on the past and opening it to a new life. One evening, sitting on the porch of my renovated home with a cup of tea, I felt peace wash over me. The silence and calm surrounding me were exactly what I needed. I finally understood that sometimes losing family is the best thing that can happen. Sometimes to find yourself, you have to lose everything tying you to the past. Sometimes to start a new life, you have to tear the old one down to its foundations. If you recognized yourself in any part of this story, if you're living with someone who diminishes you every day, who takes without giving, who makes you feel small in your own space, ask yourself this: how many more pieces of yourself are you willing to sacrifice before you stand up and say, enough? And when they tell you that's just how they are, ask yourself, is that good enough reason for me to keep suffering? My house is beautiful now, cozy, and it belongs to me alone. I am the master of my own fate. Never again will I let anyone control my life. Never again will I allow myself to be humiliated or insulted. Never again will I live for someone else's interests. This is my story, but it doesn't have to be yours.